the plot. I get a lot of questions asked about, people say, why are you so concerned about an ascension process? The physical body's only a physical body. I'm not my physical body. So therefore, it doesn't really matter. Why do you spend all this time improving it? I know it's your temple, but they seem to think that we put too much focus on the physical. I can answer that for myself, but I just wondered if you'd put it on the tape for us why it's important that we do that.
One thing I would say on that, Rex, is that the physical body, we can all agree that we're not our physical body, yet the physical body is still a reflection of our consciousness. It does still reflect our own thoughts, our own feelings, our own words. And so one of the things that we are doing by cleaning up the physical body, so to speak, by healing the physical body and overcoming the outer manifestations within the physical body, is we are actually cleaning up our own karmic considerations. We are actually cleaning up the stuff on the inner. So while the physical body may be simply an effect, and yes, you could make a person could make an argument that, well, why bother with it then if it's not us and it's just an effect? The thing to realize is you can't, in any meaningful sense of the word, master the effect without also mastering the cause in the process. And so in the process of resurrecting or even regenerating the physical body, you are doing something much, much greater, because you're getting back and dealing with your own resistance patterns that you've set in motion, over the eons. So that's one way I would look at it.
And Rex, unfortunately, you're going to find many, many people that are operating on a death wish where they cannot be responsible for realizing that the outer universe around us is a result of our own creation. And they can't understand that. They can't believe that it's a denial of the outer yin manifestation of thought, because it is too painfully, emotionally evident to them that if they were to be responsible for what they have done in life, it would be more than they could handle. And therefore, they deny their bodies. They don't take care of their bodies. They don't watch what they put into their bodies. They fill it full of things which are nothing more than an outer manifestation of a continual death wish. Because basically they want to get out of this life, they don't want to deal with it, they want to go to the pie in the sky by and by, and they don't realize that this is our heaven and this is our hell, because this is the only heaven and the only hell people will ever have. People don't understand that. They don't realize that the thought patterns that exist here and now create the conditions in which we find ourselves, and when we die we take those same thought patterns with us, because they will be sealed upon us in the hereafter, and we will just simply recreate the very things that we weren't responsible for here. Now this is the ever-present now, and most people are so out of time and out of space through their resistance that they don't want to even look at the now because it's too painful for them. And so they deny the now. They deny their bodies. They deny their emotions by saying, well, I'm not responsible for the way I feel. You made me feel that way. Not owning up to the fact that the resistances and the reactions came from within. You follow me? And so we're always, most all of us, will have a tendency to blame other people and other conditions and other things for the way that we feel, not recognizing that the feeling is coming from within us, from the programming that we have inherited or created. You with me on that? And so many of these people who put up that argument are simply fulfilling their own death wish by a denial of individual responsibility to take care of themselves in the flesh in this lifetime. And that's been going on for eons and eons of time. And it's going to take a long while of education to break what I call the chains of death that all of us at one time or another are subject to.
The responsibility that we have for our own physical body, it's not a punishment, it's really more of an opportunity for us to overcome what we have to overcome.
Also, to get in touch with the God presence, it's a lot easier in a healthy body because you're not focusing all the time on the pain or whatever. I mean, if you have a tremendous back pain, it's hard to sit there and allow the God presence to flow through you. I mean, you can do it, but it allows the body to be in a good form so that stream of God presence can just continually be coming through you.
Thanks, Sam. My question is about the two different types of resistances. And in reading book one, the first few chapters there, I was really confused the first time or two through the book. And then as you talk later in the book about perceptual nowness and struggling against that resistance, and what I'm wondering is if you can kind of talk about those two different forms of resistance of positive and negative types of resistances.
Before John answers that, I just wanted to point something out here because I kind of keep score for you there, Lewis. I've been working with Lewis for about 2.5 years now, so I've sort of got to see a lot of the progress he's made over this time. And I don't know if any of you noticed that, but the other day when Lewis, I think yesterday when Lewis came up, I had to actually put the mic into his hand and wrap his fingers around it so he could hold it. And if you notice there, Lewis just pretty well just grabbed the mic and held it in his own hand there without any help from any of us.
Do that again. Now, we had Willem from Holland yesterday working on Lewis on between the second and the third cervical vertebrae. Lewis, don't go running away. Come over here, sir. Now, we did a little pinch test to find out how far down the body the sensitivity was. Now, Doug, you have done pinch tests on Lewis before. Is this correct?
Oh, many times.
Now, you go over here and you take a look at what happened yesterday, because we're on the, after 2.5 years now, we're on the way. Here, put this in Lewis's hand there.
Tell him what you're feeling there.
Well, my level of sensitivity seems to have moved down a bit gradually over the years, and a little bit more as a result of the session last night. So things are happening.
How sharp is that in here?
It's pretty sharp right there.
You had dull sensation there, but no sharp sensation. Lewis, initially when I met him, had basically no sensation in the body below about the nipples, front or back. And what's happened that I've seen over the years is he's got the sensation gradually moving down the body, and he's had sensation here below the nipples, but it's never been sharp. I mean, it's been sensation in the sense that if you touch him there, he can tell you're there, which he couldn't have done before. I mean, 3 years ago, he wouldn't have been able to tell if I was touching him there. But it's gone beyond that. Now he's not only knowing that I'm touching him there, but the degree of sensation is tremendous. I mean, how does this compare? Like if I pinch you right here, okay, would like say right up in here. How does that compare?
It's getting closer, and it was more so last night.
Yeah. So it's really quite an amazing thing to watch over time here.
Yeah. That's about it so far. I'm not sure what else you want me to say. It's been a slow process, but not relative to the amount of junk that's been occurred over the long time of my disability. So it seems to be beginning to change more rapidly as things go along. And
Tell him how much anesthesia you've had.
About either 22 or 23 surgeries with general anesthesia. I'm lost count after 20.
Now, pardon me, folks, but this is experience speaking here, all right? We have had many, many situations where people have had surgery, where they have had, shall we say, cervical fusions from the front, from the back, and sometimes in an hour and a half we have had the dissolving of those fusions and the returning of the neck injury to where it was in better shape than it was before they had their wreck, whatever that was. We've had spinal fusions of all kinds that we've worked with, where after a period of time, 2 days sometimes a little longer, the spinal fusions have been dissolved completely. Now we have a fusion in Lewis's neck where there is a spinal fusion from about C3 to C6 wrapped up with some steel in there. Guess what? We have seen this go. We have x-rays proving conclusively that when we're able to have that body working properly and the hormones are there as a catalytic agent for the biological transmutation of the materials in the body, when the mineral supplementation is there, which Sam here is going to talk to us about in a few minutes, there's so many things that need to be done, but when all of the elements are there, we have what some people would call modern-day miracles. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to. I just wanted to add quickly. When I first heard about bioelectronics, I was pretty insistent that I get pictures taken of everything because I was sure that it was all going to be taken care of in a week seminar. And about halfway through the first hour, I was laughing pretty hysterically at myself. But I guess what I'm trying to say is after a lot of unconsciousness that I've created for myself, it's interesting to see how, I can't remember the woman's name earlier, but just having let go of that resistance to wanting it to happen right away, and I'm sure it's not all gone, but little by little that's starting to be dissolving as the crystals dissolve, and obviously as that happens then things will start to change. And as you were saying earlier, it's the mental activity and changing your consciousness, and then the physical stuff comes following that.
Thank you, Lewis.
We still have his question.
What was your question, sir?
A lot of practice of this. My question was about the two different types of resistance. Resist the devil and he will flee from you, or resist not evil. And then also in conjunction with that, the principle of perceptual nowness and struggling against that existing resistance.
Very simple. Resistance is of two kinds, as Lewis has pointed out, and it's very simple. One is a reactive resistance, where we are resisting the experiences of life. And that's where, in one case in the scriptures, it says, resist not evil, but overcome evil with good. In other words, keep the love there. Keep the unconditional love. Keep the unconditional forgiveness there. But don't resist the experiences of life. So resist not evil. Okay? That's the first one. The second part is resist the adversary and he shall flee from thee. And this is a conscious will and desire and determination to choose to resist resist the adversary. The adversary is, in other words, if you're going to do something, resist all outer influences which you keep you from doing a constructive work based upon the exertion of will and the exertion of desire. So you're into constructive activity, sir. Now this is where, if you know that you're doing something that is right, you follow right on through no matter what. That is the sheer force of will which is necessary to bring every good creation into outer activity. On the other hand, if you resist something, then you perpetuate that, and the condition is perpetuated through the emotional resistance. But the emotional resistance is one thing. The sheer force of will is just where you simply overcome any resistance to that which you want to bring into constructive activity. Okay, sir? Now, the perceptual nowness is right now. And when we're out of the now, we're into resistance. And therefore, we hold ourselves in a continual state of perpetuity, so to speak, and we can't move from that until we can let go of the resistance and follow virtually the path of harmlessness and the path of non-resistance in our life. Then we're free, because we're not holding ourselves in a continual state of bondage with what I call the invisible prison with the invisible bars from which we cannot escape. Does that help you, sir?
You've heard the expression, Lewis, we see through a glass darkly. The thing to realize, John was speaking earlier about the melanin protein complex and the monopoles. If we are in a state of non-resistance, then we're capable of being in the now, at least in part, because non-resistance is a pretty relative term for most of us. But in an area where we're non-resistant, we're capable of receiving the energies of the given moment as they actually are. And this information is capable then of being received in through the monopoles and actually then converted by the monopoles back into an information field which we're then capable of perceiving at the mental body level, free of all resistance. If, on the other hand, we're still encumbered by resistance in a given area, then you have the continuation of the melanin protein complex. The melanin protein complex, which we'll probably talk about in greater detail later in the week, prevents us from actually receiving the information of a given moment. In other words, the information's still there, we still are where we are, but we actually don't receive the information itself clearly. It's either intercepted or distorted.
That's the crystal, and the incoming information is reverted into a stimulus response mechanism over which we have no conscious control.
Yeah, the crystal and the melanin protein complex are synonymous. So the bottom line is, we're in an area where we have resistance, we're incapable of being in the now as long as that resistance remains there, because as long as the resistance is there, you have the melanin protein complex or crystal, and that actually prevents us from receiving the information of the given experience in through the monopoles to where it can be converted. The monopoles convert things in both directions, from the mental body out into the morphogenetic field and then into physical reality, but also in reverse order. But as long as they're obstructed by the melanin protein complex, they're not capable of functioning in that way, and all you have is the stimulus response mechanism.
Right on. Questions?
It's not related to just that, but something previously. Could you explain what might be happening if a person has, during a point holding, a memory of being in an animal body, and whether it's symbolic or real, and how should it be handled?
How can I answer this effectively? Let me quote to you a poem. Let me go back and look at it. Excuse me a moment. Emerson. A subtle chain of endless rings, the next unto the furthest brings. The eye reads omens as it goes, and speaks all languages the rose. And striving to be man, the worm mounts through countless spires of form. Now, we have in our beginning of our progression, we have existed in minerals, in crystalline forms. We have moved up through the plant kingdom and have existed as plants. Our intelligence, that we might have all experiences. We have moved up into animal bodies, and we have experienced many different forms of animal bodies, with the understanding that the spirit in the animal progresses as it gives up its life in service of a higher form of life. And eventually, as you go up into the higher forms of animal life, such as porpoises and whales and dogs and cats, etc., if the service is performed well, then we move into the realm of human beings. And so many people will have memories of being cats or dogs or horses, etc. Not limited to that. Very upsetting to some people. But there are many new souls, so to speak. The question was, where do all the souls come from? You have the continual upward evolution of the soul. It's a continual upward evolution over billions and trillions of years, and it doesn't stop. Okay? Now, a new soul, many of the new souls coming into physical bodies have just experienced coming through from an animal body where the animals gave great service to mankind and literally gave their life that they might then evolve upward into human bodies. We don't go downscale necessarily, but we do go upscale. And the human body is the last of the chain of carbon-hydrogen entities that we need to go through. And so we will have these memories of actually living and being and thinking as an animal.
Yeah. Yesterday at lunchtime, I had a kind of interesting experience. I was walking down to our room there at the end of C Block, and as I kind of came around the corner, there was a big black and white bird there on the ground. And for some reason, I just kind of knelt down a little ways away from the bird, and it kind of moved over fairly close to me, maybe a couple meters away. And I didn't really do anything. I just kind of just tried to sit there and just try to feel what the bird was feeling. And I didn't actually realize what kind of bird it was at the time, so I only kind of made this connection after the fact. But the energy I got from the bird, it's because you have to realize all of these different, whether it's an animal, a plant, a rock, a blade of grass, anything, there's always intelligence there. So there's emotions, there's words, there's all of the attributes of intelligence that we have, just experienced within a different type of form, and perhaps a form that is in a lot of ways more restricted than we are. So what I picked up from this bird over and over again was something about protecting the children. And I didn't really understand it right at the time. I kept thinking, well, what is this bird trying to tell me? Is it protecting my children, or what? What does it mean? And I didn't quite get the whole thing. And then after a certain point, someone else came over, and we were asked. Linda came over, right? And we asked Linda what sort of bird it was, and she told us it was a magpie, which I didn't really, for some reason, I didn't really recognize it as a magpie. But to backtrack a little bit, when we were in Auckland in October, it was nesting season, and for those of you that are unfamiliar with magpies, which we were. Magpies are somewhat on the vicious side during nesting season, and we were up walking in the One Tree Hill Park there in Auckland. Or actually, I wasn't. Mag was with the kids, and this magpie came out of nowhere and attacked AJ and pecked him right in the face, really quite close to his eye, and really scared the heck out of Mag and Megan and AJ. And so it's kind of like only when we realized that it was a magpie did I kind of understand what was going on there. It was really just letting us know that its not that this was the same bird or anything, mind you, but that that's what magpies do. They protect their children. They protect the nest. And so it was quite an interesting little experience there.
Let's say that you have a bird with a broken wing. You take that little bird and you hold that broken wing right on the area of the break. And you feel yourself as the bird, and you feel the pain of that broken wing. And that broken wing will form and heal right back in location, and heal just like any other broken bone. Okay? Now, many of you are healing broken bones now like it's just, well, that's what you do, no problem. And I want to point this out here. John Critchley, would you come forward, please? Now, a couple of years ago, I don't think anybody would have given 2 cents for John Critchley's life. And John is now out doing a lot of things, doing whatever he wants to do. His wife broke her foot, and I'd like to have John tell you a little bit about this. This is what's happening now with people who know what they're doing.
It was about probably 6 months ago. My wife, we had to take the floor coverings up to have some tiling put in, and we had all our books in boxes. And actually, it was after a point holding session, and she wasn't tired, so she said, I think I'm going to shift all those boxes. And I said, well, you can, but I'm going to bed. But anyway, so I think she was a bit aggro with me, so she ended up kicking a box, and she broke it, and it was quite painful. So I got out of bed again. I got out of bed again, and I tried to hold the points on her foot where it appeared to be injured anyway. And we didn't get very far that night, but about the next morning went to the doctor, the medical centre, and they x-rayed it, and she did have a broken foot. And so they bandaged it up and hired us some crutches for 3 weeks and said, come back when the 3 weeks are up. So the next Tuesday night, she couldn't even put her foot to the floor. The ball of her foot was very painful, so we put her on the table, and I just went right around the foot where the break was, which was very painful for her. And in 20 minutes, she got up and walked away, and we took the crutches back.
Hold on, John. Did you take her through the burning, searing pain?
Yes, we took her right through the pain, and she went back and relived kicking the box.
That's simple, isn't it? No explanation, just took her through the kicking the box. She went through the burning, searing pain, and the bone healed. Thank you, John Critchley. That's quick explanation. Keep it simple. Okay, we've got several people with questions now. Who's first?
John, I would just like to have monopoles explained, please.
Later.
Wait a minute. Can I tell one little? Sit down. I just want to tell one little story that I had the other day. Happened to me. Going back to the question on the animals, just to show the intelligence there. We were in this house in Kerry, and John went to take a rest, so he went to sleep, and so it was really quiet, and so I decided that I'd do some meditation. So I sat down and I started meditating, and I got really deep into meditation, and I had my eyes closed, and all of a sudden I got really scared because I felt like a presence. And I opened my eyes, and there was this little tiny sparrow sitting in front of me, looking at me. And I said, wow, it felt just like a human being had entered the room. And it was just a little tiny sparrow.
That was that little cheeky one.
Yeah. But it shows you that there is an intelligence, there is a presence there within the animals and the birds.
When I was in the ashram this time, I was told that Sai Baba had told other people that at the present time 70% of the children born right now are desperate to coming down to the earth because it is a good time for spiritual development. I didn't hear that from his own mouth, but you can believe a high percentage of the Chinese whispers, as they are called, are true.
What was your last statement?
I was not. I didn't hear it from his own mouth, but I said you can believe that a high percentage of the so-called Chinese whispers, the rumors which are going on, are true. And according to the birds, we have birds around our house where we are living, and I'm talking to them all the time. I'm aping their sounds, and we are talking for a while. And when I'm leaving, they are calling, and I turn my head and I answer a few times, and then I have to leave.
To the animals, yes. I had my question for him, and I lost it. Okay, the animals, do you feel that we actually have evolved through the creatures, or have we just tapped into the memories of this vast continuum of vibrations that they all exist within and we exist within? Do you feel that we've moved through these progressions, or are we just tapping into the memories?
We have definitely had those experiences in one form or another.
Where do UFOs fit in the evolution of the spirit?
You have different forms of UFOs, so to speak, or aliens, as we would call them. Some of the UFOs come from areas where there are people like ourselves, very much like ourselves, highly advanced spiritually. There are other UFOs that are manned by little green men about 4 feet tall. These do indeed exist. I have friends of mine that work with the CIA and were called in on these UFO cases where they crashed, and they had hauled out these little people, some still living, and they take them to different areas of the United States and investigate them until they died. Okay? You have different forms of people. Some of them are what they call the alien greys. And you have two types. You have the small nose and you have the large nose. And it's an interesting thing because these people cannot eat as we eat. They have to absorb everything through their skin. You have some aliens that are part human, shall we say, and part vegetable. And they kind of live on, like a tree does, on chlorophyll situation. You know, like that's how they get their nourishment, is from the chlorophyll aspect, from sunlight. They have a food source which is quite different than any other that I know about. You have reptilian forms. You have ones that are ant-like, insect-like, and so you have a number of different forms of bodies that are highly intelligent and highly advanced in different areas. But they don't have the carbon-hydrogen matrix in their bodies to give them the ability which mortal earthmen have. And so they are not as advanced as we are, because the highest advancement in the universe we have at this time in mortality is the carbon-hydrogen matrix. Others have a lack of emotionality and are limited because they don't have the carbon-hydrogen matrix.
Can I just address something here? I guess I got the mic so I can give myself permission. There's something that I think really needs to be dispelled here with respect to aliens. And I want to look at this from a matter of principle, not any particular personalities involved here. But let's just consider something here. If you have an ascended master This is an intelligence or personality that has totally mastered physical existence. They're capable of going wherever they want to go. They don't need a spaceship to fly them around here, there, or everywhere. They have mastered this level of progression that we ourselves find ourselves in right now. And one of the most...
They have mastered the energies pertaining to the physical body. They have mastered all energies pertaining to the emotional body. And they have mastered all energies pertaining to the mental body. And when a person has mastered those three energies, then with a little bit of additional help and progression, they are able to go through the ascensional realm. In the book of Revelation, if you read it carefully, it says that eventually people will change in a twinkling of an eye. Saint Germain asked his teacher one time, "When am I going to make my ascension?" He said, "You did it 15 years ago."
So we have something that I want to address here, and it's, to put it bluntly, I would say it's a load of nonsense. And this is the concept that many are out there teaching and believing, that the ascended masters are some sort of collective delusion that's been implanted upon us by the aliens. Now, I'm sure there's many of you here that have been exposed to this type of teaching. And if you think about this, think about this not with your head but with your heart for a moment. Feel this. And just consider this. When you have the ascended masters, whereas John has said these are individuals who have mastered the physical, they've mastered the emotional, and they've mastered the mental. These are individuals who have overcome all of their resistance. Consider some of the activities that most of you have heard about that have been attributed to a lot of the aliens. And ask yourself for a moment, who would be more spiritually evolved? Some little green or gray guy flying around in a spaceship, or an ascended master? And start to look at things in terms of the overall hierarchy of progression here, and recognize that there's a vast difference between spiritual development and technological development. There's a tremendous, tremendous difference here. As John has suggested, yes, a lot of these aliens are tremendously advanced in a technological sense. But look at the sorts of the thing. Look at the activities that they're involved in. Look at the abductions. Look at the cattle mutilations. Look at the human mutilations. Look at all of the things that are going on there, and ask yourself for a moment just how advanced these civilizations are. And I think if you really just feel this with your heart, I think the answer should be pretty obvious to all of you. What's the truth in this matter, and what's just a bunch of nonsense?
There are people going around using my name, saying that I have given them permission and give them full support for doing what they're doing. And one thing they put down is they put down Jesus Christ. They put down any person historically that has been what they call a master. Saint Germain is one of their greatest targets. Jesus is one of their greatest targets, because they believe that all of these people are here to control people. I don't see it that way. What I find is that every ascended master teaches people correct principles and gives them the pleasure of governing themselves. Are you hearing me? Man wants to dominate and wants to control, and wherever you have power, you will have corruption of power. To my dying day, I will testify that Jesus Christ is a living being in a resurrected body of flesh and bone. To my dying day, I will tell you that Saint Germain is the same, that Annalise Scarron is the same, who is a little housewife, who wrote many different books that you can get from many of the good bookstores, and she made her ascension. There are many other people who have made their ascension that are some of the greatest people that ever walked this planet, and they're not known to the common to the common public because they may not have written books or may not have done grandiose things. But they have all gained their ascension from practicing certain basic laws of love, light, and perfection. Caring for their physical bodies, caring for their emotions by exercising unconditional love and unconditional forgiveness in all things, learning to never criticize, finding fault, or condemning another human being, but doing that which is necessary for the highest and best good of all mankind. Learning how to obey the laws of light, because light is the law that governs all things, and we need to understand this. And so when I have people going out, especially around Australia, going around to different people who are putting down those things that are necessary for them to understand to bring them to the ascension, and they're instituting other prostituted concepts of healing which are incomplete at best, then I get my dander up a little bit and I make a public statement that I do not endorse these people or agree with what they're doing when they're using the name of body electronics, where they have gone far beyond into body electronics on 21st century healing and so on. I will not accept that. I will not endorse it. I've told the people face to face, I don't support you, I don't agree with you, and I cannot support you in what you're doing. But when they go out publicly saying that I do, then I want you to know publicly I cannot accept that. And I must put that down because it's a black blotch in the field of body electronics. Is that strong enough?
Try one more time.
One more time?
Actually, you may have a question, but I would like you to comment on something as well from your own experience. I made the statement that we should not confuse spiritual advancement with technological advancement, and perhaps you might give a little discourse on the Menehune.
Not this time. No. These people, the Menehune, are... can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. The people that Doug just mentioned, the Menehune, to me, they're people, though there might be some argument about that. Anyway, my grandfather was connected with these people, and I had seen them myself while I was in Hawaii, and I know we have one person here from Hawaii, and I was actually living in Hawaii at the same time as John and Doug and Maggie and Anita were there, though we never met. So what I learnt from these people were exactly the same as my grandfather, were that the spiritual and the spiritual teachings, the ancient teachings and the modern teachings were to be brought together as one, and they weren't separate. And they were actually there when my ancestors had passed on to remind me when I went to Hawaii of what I was supposed to do while I was here, which was to help bring these ancient teachings, learn the modern teachings, and bring them together so that, well, the Baha'is put it, so that science and religion would be one, or the ancient teachings and the modern teachings would come together and we would all be as one again.
What's the level of spiritual advancement of these people as well as technological? From my understanding, the Menehune in Old Hawaii and Samoa and other areas never saw fit to really develop a very advanced state of technology. It was completely unnecessary for them, and yet they rose to very, very great spiritual advancement.
Well, they never needed the technology. They never needed it because they just never needed it. They never needed vehicles to go anywhere because they could, what would you call, they could manifest or transport. It's not even transport because it's actually rearranging all your molecules in one place into another. And everything is worked on thought, not on do. It's thought. So I guess the reason that maybe that I've asked to be a catalyst in this area is because we do now have modern technology. So there's a vast gap now between the two. But the question I wanted to ask was... but that was very, very interesting because I knew these things from the time I was small, but it took to get to Hawaii for it to be really shaken into me. And it's surprising they were all there at the same time.
Rebecca, you listen. And the rest of you, please learn from this. Much of this can be found in the Tales of the Night Rainbow. It's a book coming out of Hawaii about the Minahune, about the little people and their history, primarily on Molokai. One of my kahuna teachers took me aside one day and he said, "John, I want to tell you something here that you've been asking about." And he said that now this man was Polynesian. He was not Christian, he was Polynesian, and he was a teacher of the kahuna doctrines. Much like the Taunga among the Polynesians of the Cook Islands and the Maori and so on. Okay? He said to me, "John, I want you to remember this." He says, "I have been taught through my lineage of kahunas that after the resurrection of Jesus Christ, after the crucifixion and the resurrection, Jesus Christ came to the island of Kauai and taught at that time all of the kahunas from the Polynesian islands, and spent many months with them and taught them what they call the truth or the way. And the kahunas became then the teachers of the truth and the keepers of the truth. They were taught things that would make some of you wiggle in your skin, because they are simply laws that must be lived and must be understood and accepted to bring people into a state of oneness with God. One of those is pure collectivism, where you live your life for the blessing of those around you and not for your own individual self-aggrandizement. On the island of Kauai, there's 4 valleys on the Napili coastline. One of the valleys on the maps is known as the Valley of the Lost Tribes. There's about 2,500 people there. Overnight they were gone, disappeared, man, woman, and child, with all of their personal belongings left lying in the taro patches and in their little homes. This is in the late 1800s. It's called the Valley of the Lost Tribe. Where do they go? Nobody knows. My kahuna teacher knew because he was there. I mean, his teachers were there. They were taken off the earth because they had reached such a state of perfection that the earth could no longer hold them here. They had the spirit of love in their heart. I'm going to tell you one of those laws of love. It's the word aloha. The word aloha means, I see the God in you. You see the God in me. And together we are one family. This is the concept of aloha. It's the idea that whatever you do, you are God, and I trust you to be God. And the thing is, whatever you do, I'm not going to criticize you. I'm not going to find fault. I'm not going to condemn you for what you're doing, because you are God. How can you make a mistake? Therefore, whatever you're doing, I know and have trust in you that what you're doing is for the highest and best good. Anita and I do this with each other. Whatever she does, I support 100%. Whatever I do, she supports 100%, and we have total, complete trust in each other. That whatever we do will be for the highest and best good, and there's no question about that. Now think about that. Now all the kahunas were brought to the island of Kauai. These at that time were the Menehunis, the one that had mind power, as they called it. And they could teleport things by their mind, by thinking. They could take a rock here and move it over here, mentally. They could, if a person got cut here, they could heal that cut. My teacher was present. When they tore the leg off of the kahuna teacher tore the leg off of one of the kahunas, a female kahuna, threw it clear off the cliff down into a river down below, then told the others to go get it and bring it back and paste it on. They did. They knew how to do that. They had the power to reorganize the elements of the earth and the elements of the body. Doug will tell you a little story one of these days that I taught him. And he had to apply it to save his life. And he did it. But there's stories here that are real. And these things I'm telling you are real. But the kahunas in Hawaii, after a while they got into situations with the alihi, or the reigning people, and they start fighting among themselves and starting getting greedy and started working for power and control, and they lost the spirit and then entered into certain different rites of passage which took them into the field of sorcery. And they lost it. And Polynesia has lost it the same way, where many things that they have done has resorted into training these people to become sorcerers rather than people of God. There's still a little bit left in the Hawaiian Island, just a little bit left. It hasn't all been destroyed yet. But one thing that happened, these people were the Menehune, and they exist to this day. In the Cook Islands, I met one of the princesses of one of the ruling chiefs who was taken into the city of the Menehunes as a young man and met with the Menehunes and discovered their entranceway and was taken in and was told, "We will not let you go unless you promise never to reveal where we are." And he did that. He never revealed where they were. And the Menehune are very real. They have their cities on the northern island of Samoa. Rebecca is a Samoan. And her family, that is royalty, also are fully conversant and aware that the Menehune do exist. And I just found out from her they not only exist on the northern island, they also exist on the southern island of Samoa. Is that correct? Okay. And she would know. Now, these people still exist, and they can do things that many, many people cannot comprehend because they have never lost the mind power. They have never departed from the teachings that they have been given as the Menehune. And these are an ancient, ancient people that have lived in the Hawaiian Islands long before the Polynesians came there. So this is something I just want you to consider. That Jesus Christ himself is fully accepted in his teachings among the, shall we say, the white path, or the Christ-like path of the kahunas. The sorcery path rejects it.
I'm sure everyone's stunned, shocked and amazed now, John. But anyway, the question I wanted to ask you originally was, when you speak of the aliens, right? and just the way you were speaking about it, please correct me if I'm wrong, but what I wanted to ask is that when you're referring to aliens, are you just referring to the ones that you were talking to, or is anything that's not human considered alien? You know, what I didn't quite... It was a little generalized.
I think I'll keep it generalized. But I do know this, is that there are some aliens here that are for one purpose and one purpose only. And that is to survive as a alien culture, because they have nowhere else to go. But they don't have the same moral code that we have, because they feed themselves through their skin, and they have to live on enzymes and blood and things like this to get their food that they can't get in any other way. So they have gone out here and have surgically cut the different endocrine glands out of animals. You've heard about them being slaughtered, and they have all the blood's gone and all of the endocrine glands are gone and so on. And they have taken human beings and have done the same thing with the full knowledge of the governments, because agreements have been made with the governments to give the aliens a safe resting place. One place in the United States, one place in Australia, Pine Gap. Okay? And they've given these people a place to survive underground in return for highly advanced scientific information. Have you ever heard of the Trilateral Association or Organization? That was formed to take the information from the aliens and to use that for worldwide domination and control in return for preserving the identity of the culture of the alien race, so to speak, what they call the Greys. They have the wide eyes and so on. These are very, very real. But if you were to go to Pine Gap, you would go and down at level 6 in Pine Gap, and you'd see these huge, huge areas going for miles, all directions, full of cylinders, full of embryos growing and human bodies growing and so on, in these transparent cylindrical shape areas hooked up to where they're growing them. And then you see the feeding vats, where you have little slices of thigh muscle, for example, that they put on their skin, along with blood and other things and enzymes that come from the various grown other materials that they have, endocrine glands and so on, and brains and whatnot, so they can get this stuff soaked in through their bodies. This is the only way they can survive, is by living on human blood, living on human endocrine glands. Now the question is, by some people, they condone this, thinking that the Greys have to survive, and this is the way they survive. As far as they think, you're nothing but fodder for them. So they have a different way of thinking. Any questions? A little dark outside, eh? Yeah. Yes, sir. Duncan?
Actually, you've already answered half of my question, which was, have we got proof that they are actually taking these pieces of people, that is the aliens? Now, one thing I'd like to know is, when and if mankind lands on another planet, is he going to be people like us, or is he going to be people like them? In other words, are mankind going to feed off of the population of other planets they live on, that they land on rather? Because they will need meat. They will need things to eat. Are they going to prey on the populace as you've described them, ant-like people, or there could be anything. Are we going to do the same thing if we ever land on another planet? It's a hard one, isn't it?
Wolf.
Well, nearly forgot my question. But yes, I'm back down to earth again, actually. A very simple question, probably difficult to answer, I don't know. But there was this gentleman who healed his wife when she broke her foot. But the question is, I mean, was she prepared with supplements? Does that work without? I mean, like a bird, I mean, do you have to feed the bird with vitamins and minerals before you heal it? Obviously not.
I think it depends a great deal, but if the nutrient saturation is there in the body will heal under the application of body electronics. And I'd like to point out, Wolf, he didn't heal his wife's foot. She healed her own. He just put the thumb on it. Okay. Good question.
Mr. McCone, Nimrod might talk about his daughter, because she was not prepared at all for the shoulder, the clavicle.
Ian, if he wants to come up here, he's welcome to.
I had to write my question down also. I would have lost it. I was taught, I think, by a Hare Krishna person in the main street one day in my city that we go through 3 million blah 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 species before we get to human beings. That's my first question. Maybe you want to answer that one first.
If you go very carefully back into Hindu philosophy and teachings, there is so much truth there that has been rejected by Western civilization as believing that this is a bunch of nonsense. But when you break through the rituals and all of these man-made things and get back to the teachings of the truth of the Hindu philosophies, then you have these teachings there. You have, through the Vedas, you have a history of great civilizations and teachings there that were written by the original Aryans in that area. Okay, this is a known fact among the Indian people. And the Aryans came out of India and then spread on out to Europe and whatnot. But you've got these teachings going back, that go back thousands and thousands of years. Okay, sir?
The other one is, I think it's in the Bible. I haven't really read the Bible, but people keep quoting me things over the years, so I'm going to throw it back at you. Man has control over all things. Now, I guess that's been interpreted that we kill things and do whatever we want to do, and I guess that's the wrong interpretation. But my question is, if I walk through a pride of hungry lions, as Jesus Christ is depicted in different pictures among all the wild animals, is it my ability to have unconditional love and absolutely non-resistance that allows me not to get eaten?
You have the story about the Buddha, where they sicked on the Buddha, they sicked on him this wild elephant storming at him. And he simply did nothing. He loved the elephant, and the elephant collapsed in humility at his feet. Now, herein you need no fear, but learn to deal with the concept of love. And this is the thing that's going to master all animals. We have dominion over the animals of the earth. But what's that dominion for? That is to cultivate the animals and give them every single opportunity to be protected, to grow, to live out their lives, their fullness of their life, that they might have the opportunity to expand and experience and advance within the realm of animal existence, moving up into oneness with human existence. Man was not designed to be a carnivore. It's like a cannibal. And when man gives up cannibalism, which means eating meat, he gives up cannibalism. When he gives that up, he'll no longer ever again eat red meat because he's depriving that animal a chance for progression. Okay? Now, having been one here in front of you who still eats a little bit of fish, I'm tussling with fish. But I do know positively that red meat is not to be eaten by man. Our body basically is designed to be a vegetarian body. We have a long, slow gut, like a cow. We have a long, slow gut. We don't have the fast, short gut of a cat or a dog that are designed for meat eating. And if we take meat into our body, then that meat has a tendency to ferment in our body and cause us distress and disease. Where the vegetarians over and over again will have it hands down on any meat eater. You go back to the good book to King Nebuchadnezzar, and he had his little to-do with Daniel, if you remember. Daniel ate pulse, and all of his people ate pulse. And what's pulse? Sprouted seeds. And so they had a little test about physical ability, which probably included mental ability, with all the heavy meat eaters of King Nebuchadnezzar, and who won the battle? Who won the contest? Daniel won. And this is wherein the vegetarians, in all aspects, when they're digesting and utilizing their food properly, will have it hands down over the carnivores, the cannibals. Okay? Now, if you knew the animals and could communicate to them as I'm communicating to you, the animals will speak to you, and they have feelings, they have emotions, they have memories, and we have dominion over those animals, and we have the responsibility to put an umbrella of protection and opportunity that they may grow and have experience and develop as spiritual beings and progress as we ourselves would wish to progress. Is that on tape?
In part, you covered some of my question with regards to aliens, that if we've got fear in our hearts, aren't we helping to manifest aliens, and that perfect love casts out fear? And you were just talking about with animals, can it be the same way with aliens? Although I hadn't thought about that when I got up, but yes.
I'd like to draw an analysis here. Let's say that you have a chicken farm, okay, and you've got chooks out there. You've got a lot of eggs out there. And you've got a fox that is fully intent to come in and suck the eggs and eat the chooks. Now here's where you are going to have dominion over all things. What will the decision be? To feed the fox, let him have all the chooks he wants, let him suck all the eggs he wants? You going to let him do that? Or are you simply going to protect your 10 acres in that area and simply dispatch the life of the fox? Because he's like a rose in a wheat field. A rose in a wheat field is out of time and out of place, so you pull out that rose. Just like you'd pull the wheat out of a flower bed where you're growing your roses. The wheat, no matter how useful the wheat is, it's out of place when it comes to a rose garden. Now here's where you have to make a decision. And you have to be practical about these matters, not going to be, shall I use the word reactive, but acting out of principle and not reacting out of emotion. If you go back to Genesis, it says, "Thou shalt not kill." The proper translation of that, which is quite upsetting to many, many people, but this is the proper translation. It says, "Thou shalt not murder in cold blood." Now that puts a whole different aspect on it, doesn't it? Brooke first.
And then what you do with the fox is you use its pelt or its skin so that the fox may go on up to an evolutionary spiral that served its purpose for the benefit of you by keeping your children warm. I don't know, maybe. I would. That wasn't my question. Was that good? There's more? Oh. This is for Wolf, because he asked about the bird, and taking supplements and being prepared physically. That I think it's important for us to realise that the physical nutrition side of it, although is really, really important, it's like building a house. You need to lay down a good foundation, otherwise the house will blow down in a good storm. But it's only, as John and Doug always point out, it's only 10% of the principles of what's needed within body electronics. The other 10% is how to hold the points, the mechanical aspect of what angle and what pressure and what do we need, and reading the eyes, and etc., etc. But the 80%, with which the bird's probably more in touch with than we are, is what really needs to be looked at, because there's been a lot of examples of people being having their broken bones healed back, but they've never even been on the program. Doug's got a good example of a lady down the coast a ways who'd simply been meditating for 35 years and was very, very spiritually prepared. Very, very aware of lovingly and willingly enduring the pain and just unconditionally loving and forgiving whatever experiences and being willing to experience whatever comes up emotionally, etc., as you're putting physical pressure on the area. So I think it's important to realise that that other 80% is really, if we had true mastery over that, I'd be ascended, I know that.
Thank you.
The Lost Tribe, or the Valley of the Lost Tribe, the people of that place, did they become ascended?
Because of their deep love for one another, and because they acted in concert as a community, their vibrational influences brought them up to the point where there are people like ourselves on other planets. But according to what my kahuna teacher taught me, he said that a large cigar-shaped spacecraft came down into the valley, and all of the people were taken from the Earth to another area where they could progress more rapidly. That means they went on a spaceship. But there are aliens that are positive. They're not all negative out there, and I want to make that very clear. And there are many people that are on UFOs that are our friends. And they're not all evil, they're not all bad. But they have given us our opportunity with the governments, and the governments have chosen to go with the aliens that are not of God.
In answer to your question about ascension, the thing to realize is there are other steps prior to ascension that one can go through, and there's one in particular that's known as translation, which is where the body is uplifted quite a bit, but it's still well short of ascension. And if you go back historically and read in the book of Genesis, you'll see there's you're going down through the generations from Adam. You'll note when you get to about the 7th generation or so, when you get to a man named Enoch, that Enoch didn't die. I mean, you read through the verse after verse after verse, and it'll say so and so was born and walked so many days and had so and so begat so and lived another few years, and then he died. And it'll say the same thing, and only the names and the numbers change from one generation to the next. But when you get to Enoch, it doesn't say anything about dying. It says he lived a certain amount of time, had Methuselah, and then walked so many more years with God, and then he was no more, for God took him. And from what John has told me, if we understand this properly, it actually refers not just to Enoch, but to an entire city of Enoch, that, like the Valley of the Lost Tribes, the people were living according to some very high spiritual laws. And if you want to look at it another way, they got to such a high vibratory rate as a group that it was like the earth could no longer hold them. They really were had raised themselves up so much that they were no longer compatible with the relatively lower vibration of the rest of humanity, so they literally had to be taken somewhere else so that they could continue their progression.
You want your crystal stretched a little bit here? Is this on? Okay, mark this down and remember it. Don't go out and talk to people about it because they think you're crazier than a March hare. But what you've got here in the city of Enoch, the city of Enoch existed in the Gulf of Mexico, which now is the Gulf of Mexico. And this has been a strange thing to a lot of your people who study the Gulf of Mexico. And what happened in that area, because it doesn't conform to any other, I mean, it's just like somebody took a piece of ground and lifted it out of that whole area because it doesn't conform to any of the patterns of landmass drift and so on. But the city of Enoch was a large land mass that was taken out of what is now the Gulf of Mexico. Now just write that down. Later on you'll learn that the city of Enoch will return. This is something that will happen, and this will happen possibly when the earth is ready to receive them back again.
Well, just if you want a couple more, or one more instance at any rate of translation, just again go back within the Christian tradition, go back to the New Testament and look at the individual known as John the Beloved, one of the disciples of or apostles. And if you read very carefully there, it says that he, the wish that he asked for was to remain on earth until his Lord and Master came again. And he was translated and has continued to exist in a body for over 2,000 years at this point.
And you have other people who have been translated. We won't get into them right now, but they are still here on the earth, and people know them personally and have been taught by them personally. They're about 2,000 years old. A lot of things are going on, folks, on this little earth that the average population knows nothing about because their heart is set upon the things of the world and they have no concern about the things of God. Tessa.
Well, this is not a question, but it's about animals. And I used to run a nursery school. And at the end of the day, it was story time to send the children home peacefully. And we had big Zanzibar tortoises in the garden. And the tortoises knew when it was story time. And they'd come up and join us and listen to the story. And then they'd love the music and the songs. And then I was thinking about, I've been learning from a Dr. Singh about the natural plants and herbs in Africa. And he was saying when you go into a forest and you're looking for the trees and the plants, learn to listen to the trees and watch them. So he went with a friend of his, and this friend was a bit impatient. He wanted to get his herbs and take them home and dry them and help his family with all their problems. And Singh said, just wait, listen, look at the trees, see if they're waving. If they're waving their arms and branches, then they welcome you. They're there and you can take from them. But if they're stuck still like this, beware, don't go in. So his friend said, none of that, it's nonsense. So this friend went into the forest and a lion got him. That was the tale of the Singh.
Thank you. How many of you are really aware that trees, plants, flowers, and so on are very much alive and well? They have emotions just like we have. They have memories just like we have. They have feelings and thoughts. And when you get close to them, they can talk to you just like I'm talking to you. They will communicate to you, and you will hear them, and you will talk to them. And this is something that a lot of people are able to do, but they don't talk about it. But they talk to their plants talk to them, and it's a beautiful experience. But this is very much a real thing. Vivian.
Our intestinal tract isn't right for meat. I think that was the one of the issues, John. So, what about fish? What about fish?
We'll talk about that later. Sama.
Actually, I'm trying to look for an explanation of my experience last night. After working on Rebecca, I went home and slept. Then I found myself in two different worlds. But simultaneously, I was aware, very conscious of each world. It's like that is Sama some thousands of years behind. And Sama is active, doing everything. And Sama is here, watching Sama there, and still very aware that Sama is here. But what then happened was, in the other world, which was far, far down the line, Sama was actually having body electronics being done on him. And I realized at that moment that my legs were like paralyzed. And the first thing I had was a cramp. And immediately it came to me, what John had said in class yesterday was, if there is a cramp, you make sure you hold still. And as I kept holding still, the cramp moved from my left leg to the right one. And I decided I was going to hold the left leg still. And as it went through, suddenly the whole thing disappeared. And then that's where the dream ended.
Was it a dream? We'll talk to you about that privately, sir. Later. Okay.
There were no dark clouds outside before when I went to look, when the lights all went dim.
Yes? What are you telling me?
Well, I just felt like there was a definite darkening of the light in here, and I just went outside to see if there were any unusually big clouds overhead, and there weren't. And so there was something definitely happening at that point.
I looked outside. It was dark out there, too. Did you look outside? It was dark all over out there, wasn't it? Interesting phenomena. Mark it down, phenomena. Your tape recorder stopped. I told you that oftentimes happens. Okay, have fun. Now, Esther, would you mind holding what you have to say till a later time? Okay, now we're going to get down to business for a while, and I want to introduce to you a gentleman. And Sam, thank you for putting up with our antics. You've been around us long enough to know, right? Okay, but this is the way it is. Sam Catalano is from Innisfail, and Sam is the gentleman who has gone through emotional and physical hell for many years to bring about the opportunity of this particular beautiful material called Min Plus that many of you are using as a source of minerals. And I'd like to turn the time over to Sam to take as much time as he wants. There's no cutoff time, Sam. And I want you to share with this group of people, and many of these people have been through their own knocks in life, and just share with these people about this beautiful product that you've developed.
Thank you, John, and ladies and gentlemen.
Directional.
Right. Okay. I think, firstly, I'd like to say that I've enjoyed sitting here this morning, because certainly a lot of the things that you have spoken about things that I feel and things that I personally have experienced. Like the lady over there that said she was a perfectionist and everything had to be right. My wife is a perfectionist. My eldest daughter is a perfectionist, and only recently she failed at one of her exams. And she was almost ready to go over the edge because she failed the exam. She said, "I cannot fail." I said, "But failing is an experience." I mean, she says, look at me. I mean, it's just a lot of things I failed at, but I pick up and go again. And it took me probably 3 days of talking and coaching to her to get that thought out of her mind. So that a lot of the things that you ladies and gentlemen are speaking about here this morning, I understand. The other comment I'd like to make is when John was talking about prejudices and that, when we are born, we have no prejudices. All the prejudices we have in our lives is things that we train ourselves to after we are born. As babies, we cry. Mother comes along and cuddles us. So if we want a cuddle or we want a lolly, we cry. And it goes on and on from there. So this is where it all comes from. So that certainly John is experiencing with these points that you were talking about, you can go back to these prejudices and try and get these prejudices out of people's lives. And so that I can relate to those sorts of things. Getting back to the main thing of what I'm here for is Men Plus. Firstly, a quick run through my experiences. I started, basically I'm a farmer, basically. And while I was farming, one of the things I did recognise and notice that wherever there were stones in a paddock, whilst we cursed them and they created problems with harvesting and problems with working the fields, we always had better crops there. When there was droughts, the crops stood up better to the droughts. They didn't get the insect damage that we got in other sections of the fields where there were no stones. Then in 1982, I started quarrying. And the quarry was based in a cattle paddock. And within a couple of weeks of our starting the quarry, we would notice that the cattle sit on the ridge. They'd go out and feed in the morning. They'd come back in under the trees about 10 o'clock. They would sit there chewing their cuds and watching us till we would knock off at 4:30 and hose the plant down. The moment that plant stopped, the pump started, we started hosing down. They would race down from the hill, walk across the creek with beautiful clear water and come and drink the wash waters from the plant, the water we hosed down for the plant. And at first I thought, well, these things must be mad. And then we sort of sat back and looked at it, and we started watching their patterns, their feeding patterns. And the feeding pattern was they would always heavily graze downwind from the plant, where all the fine dust was depositing on the grass. And so I approached DPI, CSIRO, BSES, and said, there's got to be something in this stone for these cattle to go like this. And they said, you're mad. Not being one to be convinced once I've got an idea in my mind, it takes a lot of me to change my mind. I said, not being one that's distracted easily, I kept nibbling and gnawing at this. And then a Dr. Gavin Gilman came onto the scene, who came to Australia from Hawaii. And he had done some work in Hawaii on rock dust. And somehow we met. Anyway, he said, there's definitely some very good minerals in rocks. There's all different types of rocks and all different sorts of minerals. So we set about starting our research on that, and we started our research on that in 1984. Those days we'd set bags up underneath return rollers on plants, and we'd put bags over top of screens to hold dust. And at one stage we didn't have enough material for the research we were doing, so we ended up laying a heap of material on a concrete floor and run over it with a road roller, and then painfully get there with a hand sieve and sieve all the fines out, because it's what we were looking for. Then in 1988, the Australian government, in their wisdom, decided to cut off funding for this sort of work. And when they found out that Gavin was doing this sort of work, they said, sorry, there is no more funding. If you want to go back to traditional research, there's funding. If not, sorry. Gavin, wanting to continue this sort of work, decided to leave Australia and took a job with the World Bank and went to Cameroon and West Africa to set up a laboratory for them. He worked there for probably 3 or 4 years. He's now retired and back in Australia living in Townsville, and we do some research, still do some research work with Gavin. But we were sort of left on like a shag on a rock, to use the old proverb, and I said, where do we go from here? To research these sorts of products, it takes a special type of research scientist, a research scientist who is not governed by the petrochemical industry and the big pharmaceutical companies. We couldn't find one in Australia. The best we could find was Queensland University, and there was the Dr. Ross Guthridge, which wasn't too bad, but still left a lot to be desired as far as I was concerned, but that's the best we could get, and that's where we went. We went there and we ran 600, going back a step, with the work we did with Gavin, and basically the work we did with Gavin was all centred about what the product would do, what the release factors were, how coarse we would need it. We needed the product. And unfortunately, we haven't got a 35mm slide projector here today, but I had all these graphed out and all on slides. Basically, what we found with it was that we had to get material down under 150 micron to get our best results. The first material we started working with, and if we go back a step further, back in just after the war, Hopman de Villiers in Mauritius, which was off Guinan Island off Africa, he did some work with basalts over there in sugarcane. Whilst he used 180 tonnes per acre, it's just a one-off application, and it was very coarse material. The material he used was minus 25mm crusher run. He found that in 4 years he got more cane he got as much cane off the treated plots than he got off the untreated plots in 5 years. So he increased production considerably, also increased the sugar levels. The sugar levels increased actually more than the physical ton levels. So that it was, in 4 years he basically got the income that we'd get in 5.5 years without using the product. And the work that we'd done with Gavin on release factors, we had to get it down fine. So we set about reducing our product down to 150 micron. And we set about doing these glasshouse pot trials at Queensland University. We had 600 pot trials we did there, with and without, and what happened if you added nitrogen, and what happened if you didn't add nitrogen and added potassium, what happened if you didn't add that and you added phosphate, if you didn't add that and you added zinc, and then emission trials with this and without that one, and a whole host of things. So we ended up with 600 pots in the trial, and we had 2 replications of 3 plots of each thing we did. Basically, what that told us was that yes, definitely there was release factor. We increased root growth in corn, because corn was the plant we were using in the pot trials. We increased root growth in corn by 8% in 13 weeks. 8% in 13 weeks. We increased pH of soil by about 30% in 13 weeks. We increased calorie exchange capacity, and I don't know whether any of you people here conversant with calorie exchange capacity of soils. Basically, calorie exchange capacity is the soil's ability to hang on to nutrients and exchange one nutrient for another, one element for another, and it's closely coupled to the pH of the soil. As you increase pH, you increase calorie exchange capacity.
How much does the carbon exchange capacity relate to the level of soil microbe population?
Well, we know it increases the soil microbial population, but at this stage I have not been able to get anybody to do me a biomass. And by biomass I mean is do a microbial count before we apply the product, and a biocount mass after we apply the product. To do that, we need microelectronic microscopes with a magnification of about 15,000, and there's not too many there like them in Australia, and nobody in Australia is interested to spend the time, no matter what you pay them, to do a microbial count. So that we know it increases. We know it increases microbial population, and the reason we know that is because it increases soil temperature. Now, with the product you're using in those bottles there that you drink, if you were to put a thermometer in that water when you first mix the product in there, and have another bottle with clear water, and you'll find that within a couple of hours, the water with the product in it, your temperature will increase. It obviously means that the microbial population is exploding in there, and it is increasing, and we know that that it is happening by the temperature increasing, but we haven't been able to get anybody to physically count them for us.
He asked if that would be a chemical reaction.
What do you mean by the heating? No, I don't believe it is. I believe it. I firmly believe that it is increase in microbial activity that is causing that is working the water and causing that increase. Where was I? I think so that we know that these things were happening. So the next progression from there was. We need to set up a pilot plant to bring out consistent material, because what we were doing at that stage, because we were collecting underneath return rollers, because we were collecting from on top of screens, because we were collecting material that was sort of breaking off, we found that a lot of times we weren't getting the full amount of nutrients that were in that stone, because some of them, whilst the stone was hard, some of them were softer than others, and some of them would break more than others, and we ended up with our elements a little bit out of whack. So we set about looking at how we were going to grind this material down, and I looked at various ways of doing it, and we finally settled on a ball mill, and we set the mill up with dry grinding and air extraction. We looked at going into the market, and we started to market testing and selling the product. And in the first year, I had a budget of 1,000 tonnes. The petrochemical industry at that stage thought, well, this fella's nuts. They use stone to make roads. He's not going to go anywhere with it, and we leave him alone. After the first 12 months, when people were using it, people were going and saying, well, this is not bad stuff. We can reduce our fertiliser usage by using this product. This soon got back to the petrochemical industry. So in the next 12 months, they set about making life extremely hard for us. So going back to our budgets, in the first year we had a budget of 1,000 tonnes. We sold 2,200 tonnes. The second year I had a budget of 1,500 tonnes. In June we got a visit from Standards Branch. Standard Branch is the people in Australia who govern what you say on your label and govern your claims and all those sorts of things. And they said, well, look, we've had a complaint from one of your competitors to say that your product is not up to scratch. And I said to the particular man that came, I said, look, I was in your office only 2 months ago where we had 35 test results, and we looked at them all, and we averaged them out, and we discounted them by 20% to make sure that we're always in the level that we claim. They said, I realised that, and he said, I know that your testing was done by very reputable laboratories, but we have a complaint and we've got to act on it. So okay, we went in there and we took samples, and he went away, and 3 weeks later he came back to me and said, you've got a clean bill, your product is well within the range that you're claiming. Only a few weeks after that, I get a visit from the inspector from Weights and Measures. And he said, I've had a complaint from one of your competitors that your bags are weighing light. And again, I said to the inspector, look, we only put our scales in, it would have been 6 months previously, which were tested by Right Ways, who put the scales in, cross-tested by the Department of Weights and Measures, so we could get our registration. And he said, never mind, he said, we've had a complaint, we've got to act on it. I said, okay, right, I'll go ahead. The part that he did upset me was that you'd have 30 or 40 tonne of material sitting on pallets, and he would want to go and pull the pallet way down the back, the last pallet way down the back, so he had to pull every pallet out, and then he'd want the bag right on the bottom. So you had to unload the whole pallet. And we did this about 6 or 7 times, which was I was getting quite upset by them, but you've got to bite your tongue. Because they're the government people, and they can make it extremely hard for you. Anyway, he couldn't find anything wrong. So we go along, and within a month we get a visit from the local authorities. They say, we've got a complaint that your plant is making too much dust and noise. I said, certainly, as far as dust is concerned, I agree that we are a little bit dusty at the moment. We're in the process of controlling this, and all we need to do is when you start something new, when you look at the crystal ball and you say, well, how is it going to work? And you think it's going to work one way, but then when you start doing it, the product has got news for you, and it wants to behave differently. You can't cover all the contingencies. But we had contingency plans, and the plan was that, yes, we will fully enclose the loading bay with electronically controlled doors, that when we are operating in there, nothing will operate until the doors are closed, so it controls all the dust. And that was the contingency plan, and we were in the process of doing that. Indeed, we'd put building applications into the local authority saying what we were going to do. But again, the local authority, in their wisdom, decided to issue a stop building order on us, which precluded us from doing any of this building and doing anything that would reduce the dust levels that we were making. So we had to then apply to courts, and to cut a long story short, they put a stop work order on us. Saying that we couldn't operate anymore. Prior to that, we were operating under what they refer to here as a consent use thing, which you apply to the council to get your consent use. They put certain conditions on you, and you operated from there. They said, well, look, you can't operate under a consent use anymore. You've got to apply for a full rezone. In the meantime, the plant was stopped because while we went through the application, the full rezone. Incidentally, the councils in Australia are made, again, Aptica Council was made up of 8 councillors and a chairman. And incidentally enough, 2 of the councillors were distributors for a fertiliser company, a chemical-based fertiliser company. I don't have to tell you. I don't have to tell you anything like any more than that. But anyway, before we closed down, we got the plant evaluated by the Department of Environment and Heritage. And when we went to the Department of Environment and Heritage, they said to me, "Well, this is strange." So, because normally, if there is a problem with dust and noise, the the council comes to us to evaluate the noise levels and the dust levels. So I said, well, could you please come and evaluate this for me? I said, yeah, no problem. So they waltzed down there, and we had the plant running right through into the early hours of the morning, because we wanted to have a look at what the dust levels were, what the noise levels were. And we found that we were complying with the Noise Abatement Act from 6 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, 6 days a week. As far as the dust level was concerned, we were marginally over the allowable dust level, but their recommendation was to fully enclose the loading bay as what we were going to do anyway. And so we furnished the council with this report from the Department of Environment and Heritage, and they didn't want to look at it. The council went a step further in that they forbade any of their council staff to talk to any of our consultants, because we had to get dust and noise consultants, we had to get town planning consultants, we had to do an EIS, we had to do all sorts of weird and wonderful things like that. They forbade any of their staff to talk to our consultants, to make things very difficult for us. But anyway, with all this bad publicity and all this front page of the newspaper that Min Plus Panthers is closing down, and all these those sorts of things, in the 9 months that we operated in the second year, we sold 3,800 tonnes of product. Dad, we went to court. The town planner for the council was forced to admit in court, when he was asked by our barrister if he had seen the plant. They said no. He said, I did my evaluation of the plant just by driving past the road. Their dust and acoustic engineer did his report sitting in his air-conditioned office in Brisbane. Now these things are all in the transcript. If anybody wants to go and have a look at the transcripts of Pacific Mineral Development versus Johnson Shire, they are all contained in the transcript. So the judge, in his wisdom, allowed the full rezone to special facilities milling, made 3 orders, and the 3 orders he made was, the first order was that the site be rezoned to special facilities milling. The second order was that they couldn't restrict the hours of operation, provided we complied with Noise Abatement Act. And the third order was that as the site had a full rezone, that they could not limit the life of the plant. And he set down a period of 6 weeks for ourselves and the local authority to work out the conditions of operation. The council, and again their wisdom, came back and with 19 conditions. And a lot of the conditions were unrealistic. The 3 conditions were directly contravening the three orders that the judge had made. So over 4 weeks of backwards and forwards and throwing, we reduced those conditions to 11. 8 conditions that were acceptable, 3 conditions that weren't acceptable, and the 3 conditions that weren't acceptable were that the site, instead of being special facility milling, be fertiliser manufacture only. Number 2, that the hours of operation be restricted from 7 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 days a week. And thirdly, which was the worst condition, was that the life of the plant be 5 years, and that we give the council power of attorney to close the plant down at the end of 5 years, dispose of it, and rezone the land back to rural. And we said, no way we're going to accept that. And so we head back to the courts again. This time, instead of the court case being in Innisfail and Cairns, it was in Brisbane. So we go back to court in Brisbane. The day the court arrives, and the council is only represented by a town agent who came and said, we have no evidence to offer. The case lasted 7 minutes. We got what we wanted. But we had been almost 2 years without producing product. We had lost all our market. We had allowed the petrochemical industry to really set up a whispering campaign against the product and against ourselves personally. And that's something that we've been operating now for almost 2 years again. It's something we are overcoming slowly, but surely we are overcoming that. But that is the length that the petrochemical industry will go to try and stop anybody who wants to put a product up that will affect their profitability. And indeed, a lot of the work that we did, and the work that we did with Gavin originally, and then the work that we did with Ross Guthridge, indicated that if you use, and it will vary with soils, but if you use roughly 500 kilos per hectare per year, you can reduce your fertiliser usage by 30%. That's really what in Australia, the fertiliser industry in Australia is worth $1.3 billion a year. So the ICIs, the West Farmers, the Pivots, were not taking too kindly to the little farmer in Innisfail who could set up a plant and come up with a product that could take $400 or $500 million off $400 or $500 million of market. So every effort had to be made to silence us, and indeed, in a very heated discussion I had with the manager of the local council when I returned from Brisbane. He said to me, "Look," "we knew we couldn't win the case. We were aiming at two things: one, either break you, or that you would get sick of it and forget about it." And then I said to him, "Well, you've been in this town long enough. You should know me better than that. Is that we have other cash flow, so you wouldn't break us, number one. And number two, that I won't give in. I believe in the product. I believe that it is the product that is going to save the world as sustainable agriculture. Not just my product, but the products that are made from these types of materials. Because if we look at it, where did our soils come from? They are shed from stone. Right, the stones have all the minerals that were in our rock originally. One of the problems with, and one of the reasons you people are here today, is because our food chain has become that depleted of minerals, because the minerals are no longer in our soils, that you need other things to get the minerals back into your bodies. And I guess the old saying is that we are what we eat. There's nothing truer. And I guess with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'll leave it at that, and I'll certainly be happy to answer any questions that anybody would like to ask.
Are you aware of a product called Nitrosol? Nitrosol. It's a mineral chemical we use in the vineyard industry at the moment. We've been aware of the importance of minerals and the application of vines, and I was just wondering how your product stands up against this product. Are you aware of it? Do you have Nitrosol in Australia? Oh, okay, thank you. Do you have an analysis of your product?
Yes.
Thank you.
How fine have you got the product down to at this stage, and what plans have you got to refine or to get it down at ground finer in the future?
Well, basically at this stage we produce two products. One is our standard, which is 90% passing 150 micron. which is the product that is predominantly used in agriculture. In the course of process, and basically we look at the process for a minute, we air extract the product. We drop about 95% of the 150 micron material out on a cyclone onto a belt and goes up in a silo. The other 5% of the airborne material goes across to a reverse pulse dust extractor, where we take that out there, and the air we emit is 99.5% clean. That is a product that is 90% passing 40 micron. In discussions that I've had with John and other people, I've been asked to sort of try and produce the product finer. We've looked at ways of producing finer, and we haven't come up with anything concrete yet. But John has given me some ideas now, and to talk to some other people, which we are hopeful of getting it down finer than the 40 micron.
We've heard in the past that a lot of the product will be made much more assimilable by the body upon exposure to some type of acid. And so there have been people in New Zealand that have been experimenting with taking a few teaspoons of the Min Plus and maybe overnight soaking it in cider vinegar or lemon juice. And I was wondering if you had any idea what would be how long would you have to soak it in some sort of acid to get some sort of improvement in the absorbability into the body, if you know anything about that.
No, I don't know anything about that. I've got to be honest with that. I've never attempted it. We looked at do with acids to get a better release into the soils. We found that the best way of releasing the soil was by grinding it finer. The finer you ground it, the better release you had. Once you started playing around with acids, it took other acids in, and it did create some problems as far as the soils were concerned.
I was just wondering how much you use per acre on pasture, and how much you'd use per square metre on a vegetable garden.
Well, that's a particularly hard one, because there's no sort of blanket figure. You need to do a soil analysis to know what's in the soil, to know what the soil is lacking, to come up with some form of recommendation. The general rule of the thumb is about a tonne per acre. The general rule of thumb, but that's got to be varied to whatever to suit in with whatever elements are in the soil. Some soils are more depleted than others. Some soils have been formed from a rock source that is less nutrition than other rock source. Your best soils are the soils formed of basalts.
Would I be correct in that it would be a ton per acre per year? I mean, what's the time factor on that? And if you want to get your soil stocked up for hundreds of years to come, how much of this stuff can you put on without, smothering everything?
Well, you can't smother it unless you totally cover the plant, right? Apart from that, you can't smother it with the product. The plant will only take up what the soil microbes can make available, and the rest stays in the bank store. Insofar as...
Did you hear what he just said? The plant will take up no more than the soil microbes will allow. Now, what are the soil microbes? The blue-green algae in the soil. And the blue-green algae will blossom, literally, when you have it in the presence of a high amount of minerals. When you have your colloidal minerals in your soil, the blue-green algae, which is necessary for plant growth, will then just expand. Now, much of your chemical fertilizers that are put on soil, the soil is compacted and depleted of all blue-green algae. And one of the big things about this is the increase in the blue-green algae in the presence of the colloidal minerals.
John, if I could add to that, if you look at the acid-base fertilizers, and if you take muriate of potash as one of them, and it is the potash that is predominantly used throughout the whole world. It is the cheapest potash you you can get, and I guess it's probably the potash that the petrochemical industry makes the most money out of. It is 50% potash and 50% chloride. Now, I got one of my research chemist friends to do some work on it for me one day. He said, well, okay, what does this mean to me as a farmer? Well, he said, what it would mean to you as a farmer, that if you applied 1 50-kilo bag per acre, and most farmers apply a lot more than that, but if you applied 1 50-kilo bag per acre, you would have a concentration of chlorine in the top 6 inches of soil, which would be 20 times stronger than you would put in a swimming pool. Now that will just give you some idea of what these fertilizers do with the microorganisms in your soil. If we look at superphosphate, to get it to release, they add 35% sulfuric acid to it. Now, if you went to a farm and said to him, go and put some sulfuric acid on your paddock, he would shoot you. He'd say you'd kill everything. Yet he is doing exactly that when he's applying superphosphate. Certainly in Australia, and certainly in the tableland here, there's been another major problem with superphosphate. That in the course of production of superphosphate, to granulate it, they're using aluminium to granulate it. Superphosphate in itself is generally fairly high level of aluminium, but then they increase the level by adding aluminium in it to granulate it. By adding sulfuric acid to it, it makes this aluminium very, very fluid. When you apply it in the soil, if you do a pH test around the aluminium granule, your pH drops to 1.2, where nothing will grow. The problem that has arisen, and there's a couple of them, we can't say too much about them at this stage because there's still a couple of court cases going on that, but the problem they are having is that the plant roots will not penetrate the fertilizer band. And they're the problems you run into with the acid-based fertilizer. If you take urea, if you look at a bag of urea, you'll have 46% nitrogen, maximum 1 or 1.5% bayute. Bayute is a radioactive salt. As farmers, we are the garbage disposal, the radioactive disposal for the petrochemical industry. If they didn't convert that into urea and we apply it to our farms, they would have a major problem in disposing of it. So they use the farms as the garbage dump.
I've been working at vineyards for a few years now, and you would be quite surprised the amount of you wine lovers, the amount of urea that is actually used in a vineyard. That we probably put on, in a season, be 15 to 20 tonnes of urea. That'd be per 50 acre. So you'd be definitely getting way over there with this radioactive stuff. I'm going to have to phone Dad.
Sam, would you be willing to explain here now what basically you have done to the Min Plus, the size of it, and the certain amount of it that is colloidal? And would you explain also, it's my understanding, and I want you to correct me on this, that this does break down and becomes available in an acid solution. Is that correct, sir?
In an acid soil, yeah.
Yeah. Now, even in the body, the human body.
I'll just digress from that one. I think a little bit first and talk about the urea that the chap over here I think I spoke about. With urea is very, very acidifying as far as our soils are concerned. It takes 1.88 kilos of Min Plus or a good quality lime to neutralise the acidity generated by 1 kilo of nitrogen in urea. If we look at sulfate of ammonia, because of the sulfur that's with it, it takes 5.3 kilos to neutralise the acidity generated by 1 kilo by 1 kilo of nitrogen in sulfate of ammonia. That'll give you an idea of the amount of nitrogen, the amount of urea, and that is used as to how it is acidifying our soils. And if I could keep going on that for a minute, John, before I answer your question, at pH 4.5 in your soils, your plant, and I'll just get the exact figures for you because I've got them here. At pH 4.5, your plant can only utilise 30% of the nitrogen, 23% of the phosphate, and 33% of the potash. At pH 5, you can utilise 53% of the nitrogen, 34% of the phosphate, 52% of the potash. At 5.5, it goes to 77% of the nitrogen, 48% of the phosphate, and 77% of the potash. At pH 6, it's 89, 52, 100, and pH 7, it's 100 across the board. In Australia, our farming lands, in a recent study by CSIRO, indicate an average of about 5, with a low of 4 and a high of about, well, if you get into the alkaline soils of the Burdekin, you get a high of about 8. But your average is about 5. So that 50% of that $1.3 billion that I said before of fertiliser that is applied is not utilised. And because it is soluble, it only ends up in one place. That's out in the ocean, out in the riverways, and then out in the Barrier Reef, or if it's in the United States, out into your oceans there, or whatever place it is. So that's basically what I want to say. Now, getting back to John's question on how acid reacts with the product. Yes, acids do react with the product. It needs acids to make the product product release, and in turn, as the acids work on that, it neutralises the acids, and so one works in conjunction with the other. In the soil is concerned, and so far as our bodies are concerned, the acids in our bile duct, I think, John, from memory, I read somewhere they're about 2 pH. So they are our bile duct in our body is very, very acid. So again, that would break the product down. I haven't got the exact figures with me, but I can look them up and get them for you if anybody's interested in what the pH of the human bile duct is. John may know. Do you know, John? No. But I think from memory it's about 2. So that the body is highly acid, so it will attack the product and make it fairly well available.
Sum up.
Thank you. Being from Cameroon, I became very interested when you said your friend has been doing his research in Cameroon. Now, my observation in Cameroon has always been that this is one of the most fertile volcanic lands in West Africa. But it annoys me a lot to find a lot of people using fertilizer when the land itself is so fertile. Now, my first question is, did you find a situation where the Cameroon government actively supported the research on this work?
I think Gavin was over there under funding from the World Bank. It wasn't from the Cameroon government.
My second question was, going to ask you if the World Bank could actually support a plan there. Suppose one applies to the World Bank to create a plant similar to what you have here. Can the World Bank support it? Now it seems from what you are saying it's a possibility. Now my last question is, if it's not a possibility, can you consider actually creating a plant in Cameroon if you have the right raw material?
Well, basically to answer that question there, the World Bank, we've looked at sort of trying to do research in some of these countries, and what we need initially, is an application from that country, either to ourselves. Well, probably if they wanted the research to be done on our type of product, the application would have to come to us. Then we would pass it on to the respective authorities and then see whether they would fund it. What happens a lot of times that if the request goes directly to the funding body, that they would then choose who they give the money to do that research and what type of product they do research. Insofar as putting a plant up there, certainly if the right material was there and there was funding available, I would only be too happy to assist them in setting a plant up.
You all get together. Okay. Now, David, you're next, sir. Oh, Simon.
This might be a bit old now, but we were talking before about how much of this product to put on per acre. We've been growing wheatgrass in, well, this is pertaining to gardens anyway. We've been growing wheatgrass in these broccoli boxes for juicing, and I found that if I put much more than about half a cup of Min Plus sediment, that's the stuff that you get out of the bottom of your drink, if you're letting it settle out, if you put more than about half a cup of that into a broccoli box of soil, about say so deep, it would make the soil go a bit hard, and it'd be difficult for seedlings to come through, and it'd make it a little more difficult for the soil to absorb moisture. Now, I mean, what we're talking about in the overall scheme of things is a fairly high concentration at that stage, but that's an observation that I made. I'd just like you to comment on it, Sam.
Basically, the comment with that would be that what I believe has happened there is that because the concentration has been high, and the product has got a 3.4 mil equivalent percentage of available magnesium, what I believe is that we've had an increase of magnesium over calcium, too high of an increase of magnesium over calcium. That will tend to do two things. One, will tend the soil to go hard, and also to tend to give the soil, as one book I read put it, give the soil diarrhea. That lets things go too quickly because the magnesium level is too high. I guess if we take my mind back when we were kids, my mother would always of a Sunday give us all of magnesia to make it go to the toilet. So this is basically what's happening with the soils. If the magnesium level gets too high, and I suspect this is what's happened in Simon's case, that his magnesium level has got too high. It's made it go hard, and then it won't hold nutrients either. Yeah, well, see, depending, Peter, what has happened with that, depending if as I said, how much of the was in the sediment. See, he could have taken more of the calcium off. You could have taken more of the calcium off and be left with a lot more magnesium there than what would normally be. So there's a lot of There's a lot of hidden things in there that we don't really know.
Yeah, the main thing main sort of reason that I got up to say that was that I didn't want everybody to go out and pour a whole pile of this stuff on your vegetable garden and expect your sort of vegetables to grow out of it, because I don't think it will. I don't think they will. But if you can be reasonably sort of sensible about it, and if you break down somewhere around about that ton to the acre, and maybe sort of 3 ton to the acre for a vegetable garden or something like that, we're probably pretty close to the ballpark, aren't we?
Yeah, well, some of the work we did, in particular, when we did the work originally with Gavin, we went up to 300 tons per acre. But we were looking at there was we weren't looking at growing anything. We were looking at calorie exchange capacity. We were looking at pH changes. We were looking at available calcium, available magnesium, available potassiums. And we know that you couldn't do these things in a commercial sense. When we did the work with Ross Guthridge at Queensland University, we did our trials from 1 tonne to 20 tonne per acre, and we went in that area. And even at the 20 tonne per acre, we didn't have any problems with it. Right.
But since he's using just a sediment, wouldn't you have a different result if you used the whole product? Definitely.
I've had some experience with the wheatgrass I've used, and I used it much stronger than Simon, 1.5 cups to only that much in the bottom of a box, so it's really strong. Of the good stuff, the straight from the bag, so it's got the fine content in it, but this is a sandy soil and high in humus, and the plants loved it. You're talking a cup and a half of powder. Like, there's a lot of powder in that, and it didn't have any harmful effects.
Yeah, well, you see, the difference with that was that Simon had taken the fines off it. So we don't really know how that has affected the mineralogy of it. We don't really know how much, what percentage of each element he'd taken out. So there's a lot of hidden things in what Simon has done to what you've done, David.
Just to pursue a point, surely the process of breaking the grains down smaller isn't selective for one element against another. That is, that what's in the fines is in the coarse grains anyway. So that I don't see that it's really important whether you use the fine or not. I think that the problem relates to the soil you're using.
Well, certainly I'd agree that certainly the soil has got a big bearing on it, and as I said before, it depends on what you've got to start with. Right? That accounts, and that determines how much you use of the product.
We can talk about plants and growing plants all day. And we know that it's absolutely essential to have highly mineralized soil to get high plants or trees and forests. And we know that to turn around the carbon dioxide buildup in the Earth's atmosphere, which is leading to the greenhouse effect, what we need to do is to plant more trees, but we have to plant trees on soil that has been prepared sufficiently by the addition of extra minerals. So we have to remineralize the soil. And this material is one thing that will do that. It's a rock dust that'll remineralize the soil. It'll put the blue-green algae back into the soil and give a chance then for any type of plant growth, including trees, to grow. Now, I'd like to leave that subject because we all agree on that, because this is what's already been established. Let's get back to human consumption of the Min Plus and take a look at that. Now, from a position here, Sam cannot make recommendations or prescribe and diagnose and this sort of thing for human consumption. Is that correct, Sam? Then let's cut the camera off for a moment here, and cut the audio off for a moment on the tapes. Just cut it off. Your kind attention, please. Okay? We're going to go ahead here and cover a lot of material as rapidly as we can in depth. Please try to save your questions until the end of each section that we cover, but make sure that those questions pertain to what we're dealing with. You are now instructors. You have the responsibility of working with people and knowing how to deal with some of the very simplest things. Some of the very simplest things are the most difficult to deal with. Now, Anita will be covering this material. We're going to cover it in such a way that it leaves no doubt. I'd like to have Doug share his experiences. I'll share some of mine occasionally. And you folks take a good close look at it and leave all extraneous questions, write them down, and pass them in at a later time, because we sometimes get bogged down on questions. So Anita, go for it.
Okay,
Okay, one moment, please. One thing that Anita is going to be doing for you is doing what is normally taking place in the Cook Island Natural Healing Center. What I do is I spend about an hour or more looking at an individual in the iris and sclera of their eye, and I go into detail on a form which I turn over to Anita, and then she interprets the form and explains everything to the patient and goes through it for sometimes 2 to 3 hours exactly what has to be done to make, so that person understands. And sometimes it's like speaking a new language, and sometimes like it's explaining things that are 180 degrees out of phase from what they have been doing for years. And it's just like pulling teeth, because Anita will be asking them to do something that they have never even considered before, much less being inclined to do it. And the arguments and the fusses that goes on are just unbelievable, because sometimes people's diets are totally atrocious. Don't take anything for granted here. Think, reason, look into it from every aspect, and these things will be fully discussed, and Anita is now in charge.
Thank you. Okay, like John said, this is for the client now. The client is there, and they may be totally unaware of the diet. They may not even know what a piece of lettuce is. So you have to come from where they are at and take them up higher. This is what I usually do, unless the person has a 1 week to live or whatever. Then I just tell them, look, you've just got to do it now. But most of the time I try to listen. I ask the person first, what do they eat? So I have some understanding of where they're coming from. Because a lot of times I'll say to them, do you eat a lot of fresh and raw food? And they'll say yes. And then I'll say, well, do you have a salad? And they say yes, lots of salads. I say, well, how many times a day do you eat a salad? Oh, not a day, once a week. And you get this a lot. So you really have to be specific, because when they say a lot, it may mean a little. And so you have to really be specific and say, how many times a day do you do it, or etc. But there's a really important couple paragraphs here, which I'm going to read out, which John has written here on page 22 in the patient guide. And this is very important because it talks about responsibility. And this is where we have to turn the responsibility onto the client. You'll find your clients are coming to you, looking at you, and wanting to be healed. You know, they think that you're going to do it in an hour or a half an hour or 15 minutes. Heal their body, which they've been disrupting for 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years, whatever. So I'm just going to read this out because it's excellent the way John has written it. The first prime responsibility of each patient is to assume full responsibility for one's state of health, physically, emotionally, and mentally. All cure comes from within, not from without, as all disease begins with the consciousness of man when out of harmony with universal law. Likewise, return to health begins with the consciousness of man aligning itself with divine law. A physician can only be a teacher to aid one in understanding how the body functions and how...
State that again, loud and long.
A physician can only be a teacher to aid one in understanding how the body functions and how to help one to regain and maintain perfect health, which will take place when one is in harmony with nature. One must be wise to recognize that there is a time, place, and purpose for all things under heaven. First, do what is necessary to save a life. If a medication will suppress a symptom of disease, then use the medication. Then while the patient is recovering, use natural medicine. One must realize that an herbal method of healing may not work on people who have weakened their body with the use of tobacco, alcohol, drugs, cooked food, and processed food. These people may require a medical approach to save their life. In a life-threatening situation, wherein herbal remedies will have little effect on the body in ill health. This is a very, very important point, because if someone comes to you and you have to hold points on them immediately, like say with a broken bone or something like that, and you know that they're eating Milky Way bars or whatever and drinking Coca-Cola, you might not get any results. So it might be better to just have them go down to the hospital emergency and just get it in a splint. Okay, now, people in good health respond quickly to natural medicine. It is a wise person who can discriminate when one or the other should be used, and it is individual responsibility which should always be maintained, as only the individual has the right to choose what it is to be done with his, her body.
Just one thing on that example regarding, say, somebody shows up and they've got a broken whatever. Most of the time, you'll find that the people may need to do a certain amount of nutritional preparation, but the thing about it is you never really know. And what we need to do here is combine the logical approach here in terms of finding out their history and what sort of supplements and all the rest, if any, and their diet. We need to combine that with really praying about it and looking for guidance one way or another, and just bearing in mind the fundamental principle that you shouldn't really work on anybody unless you're led to do so by the Spirit of God. Because the thing to realize is there will be people who you'll get fantastic results with who by any logical criteria nothing should have happened. And just as surely there'll be people who by any logical criteria should have healed up quite marvelously, and yet nothing happens with them. So the thing is, combine the logic with the prayer. I mean, look at it both intellectually and intuitively, and try to come to some sort of balance between reason and intuition here.
Yes, I totally agree with Doug. You may just be impressed to work on a specific person, although you know that person is not eating the way fresh and raw diet or whatever. So you do have to pray, and you have to go inside, and there will be times where you will make decisions that will defy all logic. Number 2, after one makes a decision as to which direction to follow to regain and maintain maximum health, one then must make an appointment for an iris sclera integrated diagnosis. Once it is ascertained what to do regarding a nutritional program and a program for the application of body electronics, one then must make choices as whether to follow a nutritional program or not, or whether or not to follow the body electronics, which leads to bodily regeneration. It is understandable that these programs take time and dedication and reflect a change in living and eating habits. Remember, freedom of choice in healthcare is a God-given right, and people have the individual responsibility to make that choice, and alone must bear the consequences of that choice. One must train oneself to read, if necessary, with a dictionary in one hand and a book in the other. We perish without knowledge. Without knowledge, we cannot govern our lives in a responsible manner. Okay. And the choice of the individual is important. You might want to sit down with them when they come with you and explain the program a little bit to see if they want to do it, because at times the person, when they hear what you have to do, they will decide to go the medical route. And that's okay, that's their choice. Okay. Now, the next part, I'm going to go through just each letter here. Sensitive leaf tea. Drink a cup of tea morning and evening. Use approximately 16 leaves per 2 cups of strong yellow tea. Is everybody familiar with the sensitive leaf? Mimosa paduca? No. Okay, well, they are serving it here in the kitchen. But, John, do you want to tell your little story on the Did you tell this the other day? Do you want to tell that now?
How many have not heard the story on... Okay, I'll just take a moment. I believe in prayer. And for approximately several years, I was very much confused over different herbalists and their approaches to different ways of healing. One herbalist would say this, and another would say this, and another would say this, and I always was looking for the magic bullet, that would get the job done, not having the wisdom at that time to realize that everyone is different and the same herb doesn't work the same on each person. I didn't have that wisdom at that time. So I was looking for that magic bullet to help people. Finally, I came to the point of being terribly confused on how do you heal the central nervous system. Because there was nothing that I could find in any of the herb books that had to deal with central nervous system disorders. And so I prayed about that, and I continued praying for 6 months. I didn't fast the entire time, but when talking about praying, we mentioned fasting on the first day, if you remember, where you do eat properly in order to live rather than living in order to eat. So I was taking very good care of my body. Well, one day I was out walking around our beautiful location. It was just approximately the same location that Doug later built his house. And I was out walking around there and just getting in touch with plants and getting in touch with nature and praying on a number of things that were of great concern to me. One of which was the central nervous system problem. And I heard a voice saying, "John." And I turned around and looked, and there was nobody there. And then this voice spoke to me again. But it was coming from a little small plant that was wrapped around a little pole. And it introduced itself to me as a sensitive leaf. Mimosa paduca is what the botanical name was. And it explained that it was the specific herb for the central nervous system. This little plant told me how I've been praying for several months on this central nervous system problem. And this particular plant, as it introduced itself to me, said it was the specific herb in the world for the healing of central nervous system disorders. Well, at that time I got rather excited about the whole issue. I went to get my kahuna teacher, and at one of them, and I left a message, and he came out to see me and sat down cross-legged in front of this plant. And he stayed there for just a few moments. And he said, yes, this plant is a new plant to Hawaii. It's only been here for a few years. And it is definitely, the leaf is definitely for the central nervous system disorders, as you have said. But the little flower, the little purple kind of violet flower at the end of the plant, this is for the brain and for all brain disorders, and the roots are for digestive disturbances in the intestines and colon. And that was very interesting to me. Later on, when we moved down to the Cook Islands, where we've been for about 8 years, in the Cook Islands there now, we found that there was no knowledge of the sensitive leaf, and you have whole fields of it. And we did find out that the roots are used in Fiji for intestinal disorders and for the small intestine and the large intestine. But there in the Cook Islands, we started using this for many of the people. About 1/3 of the population had diabetes, and they had big black blotches on their leg where there's no circulation. Their feet were numb, and many were on the verge of gangrene. And we'd give them this sensitive leaf tea and have them drink a cup of it in the morning and at night. Immediately you feel a tingling going down through the body. And after a while, they have feeling back in their numbness, where they had numbness or what they call diabetic neuropathy. The diabetic neuropathy all cleared up. They had feeling back in their feet again. Their blood sugar started to go down. And the diabetic medicine they didn't have to take as much medicine and insulin like they had taken before. People started to get better and feel better. And after a while, through all of the islands, which is about 20,000 population, all of the islands and all the old folk were using this sensitive leaf tea. I won't say all of them were, but we had 2,500 patients. And the patients all knew about it, and they all went out and taught their relatives and friends and took this tea, which they could get anywhere in the tropics, and use it. And that spread from one island to another. Now, can I get very excited about something? In Maui, Hawaii, there was always 3 leaves coming off of one stem coming off of a runner. And I would always study the anatomy of a plant when I studied a plant. And there's always 3 leaves coming off of one stem, and you had many stems with 3 leaves on the end of it. In our place in Titicaca, we had a beautiful sensitive leaf plant that we used for our tea. Big plant. And all of a sudden, one day, it died. And I was wondering about how in the world did that beautiful plant that we were so attached to, how in the world that die? And I started thinking, was it the neighbor's dogs that got to it, for spraying it, or neighbor's cats, or how in the world did that die? And it was a mystery to me. And I was a little angry because I thought somebody killed that plant, because this is a plant that Anita took everyone out to and showed them, here's a sensitive leaf. That thing died right down. It didn't die down across the street or each side of us. We're right on the ocean, about 15 strides from the ocean, from the lagoon. And I couldn't figure out why that beautiful plant died. When it came back up again, it came up with 4 leaves on the end of each stem. It had genetically changed. And it looked a little different. And then, around us, other sensitive leaf plants began to die. And they all came back with four leaves on the end of each stem. And finally, all over the island, the sensitive leaf died, and it all came back with 4 leaves. Oh my. I had tingles going up and down my spine, and looking at this and praying about that and wondering what was going on. I wrote letters away to Maui, 3 leaves. Fiji, 3 leaves. Samoa, 3 leaves. Queensland, 3 leaves. And just here in Rarotonga, it was 4 leaves. And then the islands around Rarotonga, 4 leaves. Tahiti, 4 leaves. And then finally Samoa, 4 leaves. Finally, from Hawaii, I got a letter from Kareem, 4 leaves. And all of a sudden, I realized that there was a genetic change that was made by the herb because of the consciousness of man was changing. And rather than having the herb changing man, it was man's consciousness changing the herb and correcting any genetic deficiencies that were brought about by man's violation of natural law. Now, since that time, we have noticed very carefully that there have been other changes in other plants, primarily dealing with things having to do with digestion, cleansing of the intestinal area, and so on. And we're watching these things happening. Instead of the mango only having one season for bearing, the mangoes would go all 4 seasons, and you'd have mangoes the year around. Avocados, you'd have avocados the year around. The lilikoi would be there, which was the passion fruit. That's another name for it, but we'd have that the year around. And all of a sudden we realized that man's consciousness there in the Cook Islands in Rarotonga, as the consciousness of man changed, so did the plants. And I went back and started looking at every eyeball. Now, when we get into iridology, we'll talk more about this. But there was the pupillary ruff, which is right around the pupil of the eye. You've all had iridology. When we went to the Cook Islands, there wasn't one person that we saw that didn't have a black pupillary ruff. Anita looked at every one of them. I looked at every one of them, and we wondered about the central nervous system, which the pupillary ruff represented. And we were concerned about how the central nervous system was in a state of degradation. You cannot go to the Cook Islands today and find one person with a black pupillary ruff. They're all brown to light brown, which means there has been a tremendous change in the central nervous system of all these people. And with all the people, 2,500 people having gone through point holding, every one of them gone through tremendous amounts of burning, the central nervous system is healed, morphogenetically it's healed, and you have a tremendous change in the people of the Cook Islands. Now, I don't tell them all this. They tell me above all the changes that their families have gone through. Are you hearing me? Man's consciousness is now changing the plants of the world. You go to the Cook Islands and you find, in our eyes, you find after all the point holding that's gone on there, you find the greens are more vibrant. The colors of the flowers are more vibrant. The plants are changing. And you find everything there is vibrant and alive and absolutely beautiful. And we have anyone who comes there now, it didn't used to be this way, but when people come there now, they are amazed at the beauty of the greenery and the plants and the flowers. Now this is a little interesting to us. We're not prejudiced. It's very emotional for me because I see the colors of the vibrancy of the flowers and the colors, and it's just an amazing thing. And so the sensitive leaf is something which is absolutely wonderful. You can get it from David Lloyd up here in Queensland, and you can get it from him at a very good price. He goes out and gathers it and then dries it and packages it. You can get the seed and plant your own. And remember, it takes over, but it's a situation now where we need that to heal the central nervous system. Now remember this, mark it down and never forget it. You have to heal the central nervous system first because the body heals from the inside out. And so healing from the inside out, if the central nervous system cannot be healed, then the rest of the body will not heal. So the first thing we have to pay attention to is to get that central nervous system healed and get the nerve supply back to the body. That's why we use the STO point, to get the nerve supply and circulation back to the body, so the body is able then to begin its healing journey. And this takes a bit of time.
On growing the sensitive leaf outdoors, my suspicion is that it will grow a lot further away from the equator than a lot of people will think. I mean, I don't think it's confined just to the subtropics, because I did notice at one particular place last February or so, when we were pretty well in the center of New South Wales, I found sensitive leaf growing in a little park there, and I think that's far enough in the interior that, do you get frost down there in New South Wales? I mean, it was nowhere near the coast. It was in the middle because we took the inland route down to Melbourne, and it was very definitely sensitive leaf growing there.
Was that Goda-Cola?
No, sensitive leaf. In that one little park we stopped in. I saw it all over on the grass.
I remember.
I think it was Narrandera or somewhere around that area.
Yeah, up on the higher country.
Yeah.
That's frost country there.
Okay, and when you're making it, it's good to boil it for about 20 minutes. Don't just...
Respect the plants. An old lady one time who was taught by a great old herbalist that I won't go into at this point of time, she took me out and showed me how to gather the leaves and stems from the plants. And she'd take and you talk to the plant and you get its permission to gather the herb, and as long as you can pick the leaves and they snap off easily in your hands, then the plant is willing to give them to you. Then all of a sudden, no matter how hard you grab that, they will not snap off in your hands. That means the plant has given you as much as they're willing to give. Talk to the plants, let them give you, as I have described to you, what the plant is willing to give you to be used for your herbal medicines. The same is true with the sensitive leaf plant. The sensitive leaf plant, when you touch it, it folds up on you. The leaf just folds right back up. But for people who love the sensitive leaf, they'll go up there to the sensitive leaf and they'll touch it and fondle it and hold it, and the leaf to them will not fold up because it doesn't have to be defensive around them. Is that correct, Anita?
Yes, that's right, because I was attempting to do a garden in between all the patients, which never really took off because we just have too many clients coming to us all the time. But anyway, one day I was out there attempting to do one, and I was just trying to make a row of dirt to put the seeds in, and there was a sensitive plant there, and I haven't even approached it yet, and I was about this far where Linda's sitting. That's where the sensitive was, and it started closing up on me already. And I didn't even touch it because it knew I was coming to kill it, to make the dirt for all the plants. So I didn't cut it down, but it's a very sensitive plant. And also in the I Am teachings, you'll find they talk about the colors of the plants and the flowers, and they say as the love increases, the colors get more radiant. And also, this is a very touchy subject, but the I Am talks about the colors of red and black, which they say as the love will increase, these will be erased. Like, for instance, the tomatoes. The tomatoes now are red. And they say in there, and there's one discourse where it talks about how there was one time when everybody was saying tomatoes are bad for you. So the tomatoes got more toward the color red, where they could be more toward the color pink. Colors are frequency and vibration, and red and black are the negative, or they will bring your energy down, whereas the colors of pink, purple, violet, turquoise, these will bring your energy up. We have done a lot of tests with kinesiology where people have looked at specific colors, and you can see how they become strong and other colors will make them weak, especially the red and black. So if you have a lot of red and black around you, I suggest taking it up to higher colors. Yes. 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 Eventually, as the love increases, according to the I Am, the reds will start to disappear, go more toward pinks, violets. these colors. So even the vegetables and the flowers will change.
Let's consider something. I heard about an old gentleman who was germinating all of his seeds on his little plantation down near where Dr. Bernard Jensen had his ranch. This was in Escondido, California. So I was taken out to meet this gentleman one time, and he very graciously received me and took me around his farm and showed me how he was germinating his seeds in this pyramid, and how it's all oriented north and south, you know, like the Great Pyramid of Giza. And then he took me over to the citrus orchard. He says, let me show you how to pick an orange. I thought to myself, to pick an orange? What can I learn from him about picking an orange? You know, I've gone up to many an orange tree, and you know, you grab an orange that looks ripe and you got it. Oh, he humbled me into the ground so bad. He told me how the tree was alive and took great pride in offering up its fruit to man because it wanted to serve man. And he says, you take and you don't rape the tree by taking the fruit from the tree, but you take your hand and put it gently around the fruit, and if the tree offers that to you, it'll drop it right into your hand. That's really touched my heart. And then he says, it has to be finished by the sun for it to be healthy for you. And he explained that all commercial forms of oranges that are picked green, that hasn't been finished by the sun, and as a result, when you drink all this canned orange juice and so on, or even get the oranges in the supermarket, they're all picked at the wrong time, because you should pick the fruit in the season thereof, preferably in the location where you live. But he went out and he just put his hand on this one orange and just dropped right into his hand. I tried it, and it did the same thing for me. That was a great lesson for me. Now, let's talk about black and white. He took me over to a tree, and he says, do you see this tree here? And I looked at the tree, yeah. He says, you know what kind it is? Yeah, it looks like a cherry tree. He says, yes, this is a Bing cherry tree. What color is a Bing cherry? Used to call it when I was a boy black, because it's just a dark black cherry, and it has the most delicious taste you've ever had in your life. He said to me, just a couple of years ago, I was walking by this tree, and the tree spoke to him and told him, I have a gift for you. And I stood there to listen to what he had to say, and he said nothing. And yeah. And he said, it took until the next spring, the springtime, the winter passed, the springtime came, the flowers came on, and you had the little green cherries, you know, on the Bing cherry tree. Except when they ripened, he had the most beautiful tree full of pure white Bing cherries. And it was the sweetest cherries that he had ever had, and he took this huge harvest of Bing cherries from this one tree and shared it with all the neighbors up and down through the valley and into town, because nobody had ever had a white Bing cherry before, and they were delicious. Now I want to share this with you. When you're kind to your trees, when you're kind to your orchards and your plants, and you love them and you take care of them, they will talk to you. They will share with you. They'll take you into their confidence, and they'll love you. They'll sustain you, and they will teach you what they know. And it's a very high form of intelligence, my friends. Very high form. So honor your plants.
Thank you, John. Okay. Now, Gotu Kola. This is another very beautiful little plant, which we found is very good for helping to clear the brain. You know, when you have that fogginess up in the brain? For clear thinking, it's very good. And we actually grow it in Rarotonga. but it's also available in capsules for people who can't grow it. Should be able to grow it in tropical areas, though, very easily.
In Hawaii, I was introduced to Gotu Kola. And this kind of really touched my heart because my kahuna teacher took me out, and we were going down through the valleys there and looking at different plants and explaining what they were for, how to feel their energies and so on. And as it happened, he said, now this little plant here, if you take 2 leaves of this plant, he gave it a Hawaiian name at the time, which I forget. He took 2 leaves. He says, you take 2 leaves every morning and you'll never be sick. Okay? 2 leaves every morning and you'll never be sick. And this is Gotu Kola. And for the people who have been doing that faithfully, their health just is wonderful. It takes the oxygen and brings it right into the cells.
Okay, any questions on that? Okay. Yes, Tom. Well, in capsules it's dried. I eat it. I just go out in the yard and pick it up from the ground and eat it. I just graze. I just graze on it. Yeah, I just go out and pick it and eat it.
Let's take garlic. After you harvest it, after you grind it, after you encapsulate it and store it and pass it on down the line from distributor to eventually to a user, that's sometimes a year to a year and a half from the gathering of the garlic to the using of that garlic. We do know that 6 months after it has been harvested and ground up, it has lost over 50% of its activity. After a year, it's lost 90% of its activity. And yet how many of us have these little bottles of herbs that have been there for 5 or 6, 10 years sitting up on our shelf? We all have them. Now, the point of it all is, if it's bark and roots, that's one thing. But the herb, if like the Gotu Kola or anything else, after just a very short time, it has lost all of its viability. All of its active ingredients are gone. 6 months to a year, it's useless.
Yeah, it's very easy to grow if you're living in a house where you have some land. You don't need that much land either to grow it. It should grow there, yes. I don't know about Arizona. Okay, the next one. Well, this is going to hit some people here, and this is sometimes a hard issue to deal with some of your clients when they come to you. Withdraw from cigarettes, alcohol, and recreational drugs. Now, Simon, do you want to come up and give your little story that you told me the other day? Because I think it's really nice.
Well, I gave up smoking just after Christmas last year. I went to. I was told that by this fellow who he could heal my auric field from the craving. And anyway, I made an appointment with him and went down to see him, and he dragged me off to a homeopath, and the homeopath gave me some supplements. And then he performed this healing on my auric field, and said, off you go. And anyway, so away I went. I carried the tobacco around for a couple of days, and then sort of left it behind, like you sort of leave a good mate that you've been with for the past 15, 20 years. And but anyway, after a few days, I started to get this burning in my tongue, and it was like, I don't know how many of you have ever smoked, but if you smoke really dry tobacco in a pipe, it'll really burn your tongue and the top of your mouth. And it was just like that. But it went on for about 4 days. where my tongue, it was burning so much I used to look at the mirror to see if it was scarred or anything. But and my lips were burning too, and also where I used to get where if I smoked a lot I'd get sort of little burnt patches on my lips where cigarettes got too hot. My lips were like that, got really burnt right from the corner right round here. And that went on for about 4 days too. Anyway, I went into a healing crisis which lasted about 7 days. I had a day off yesterday, but I'm back on it again today. But another thing that happened was my teeth were really getting sore. I started to eat chewing gum and Tic Tacs to sort of just keep me from doing something in my mouth. And my teeth started to get really sore, and my gums started to get really sore. And I've knocked that off now, but they're still sort of playing up a bit. But that's about it.
Thank you, Simon.